The Baylor family lost a true legend and a larger-than-life figure in the Bears football program. Let's talk about J.J. Joe and his impact on this university on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube. I appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. Really appreciate that. And on this Thursday, we're going to be talking about the life and legacy of J.J. Joe and all that he's given back to the Baylor community, and some shocking news this week. We are also going to take a look at Baylor men's basketball and their next opponent, Oklahoma State. They're coming off a big upset win, what that could mean for this matchup on Saturday and beyond Saturday. Will the Bears even be an NCAA tournament team? We'll tell you what Joe Lunardi thinks in his bracketology. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. But of course, the natural place to start, as you saw with the title and the open here, is the really awful, sad news of J.J. Joe's passing on Tuesday night. We got the word Wednesday morning, and I think it really just sent a shockwave throughout all of Baylor Nation. A guy that any Baylor fan is familiar with, whether you've met JJ or not. Obviously, a legend as a player and a guy who continued to give back to his alma mater for years after. Just finished up season number 21 as the color commentator with John Morris for really the soundtrack to your Saturdays for a long time. Here at Baylor, but he was only 54 years old. I mean, way too young. Prayers certainly are out for his family, 3 kids, a wife. It's horrible. And so many people that cover this team day in, day out have such great relationships with JJ and JJ's family that it's just a really tough day. And for those of you who watch and listen every day, a lot of you might know, JJ just as an analyst, but I think that does a disservice to not only his business career, but his football career too. And I mean, we'll talk about, how he gives back to this university. But first off, as a football player, I think it needs to be noted that he is one of the best quarterbacks in Baylor football history. And his story as a football player at Baylor is pretty remarkable. JJ was a highly touted recruit out of Arlington Lamar, and he would certainly let you know where he went to school at Arlington Lamar quite a bit. But he was a big time dual threat quarterback before that was really a thing. You had kind of your wishbone running quarterbacks, and then you had passing quarterbacks. There weren't a lot of dual threats back in those days outside of an option offense, which Baylor didn't really run, but kind of came to be known for just a little bit with JJ calling the signals. He came in as a freshman, as the 3rd string quarterback, and like 5 games into the season, he was playing. And you still see his name all over the record books at Baylor. In fact, to make sure I don't get this wrong, 32 years after his graduation in 93, he is still the program record holder for yards per completion, and he still ranks in the top 10 in career passing yards, completions, touchdown passes, and total offense, and was a 3-time academic All-American and part of Baylor's all-decade team from the 1990s. Appreciate Baylor Athletic Communications putting all that out there, because obviously we'll remember JJ for things outside of football for sure, but he was a heck of a player, man. Like, he really was. Option quarterbacks can't sling it the way JJ Joe could. Again, still the program's leader in yards per completion. Think of how much has happened in offense in the last 30 years, and specifically what happened to Baylor's offense over the last 30 years. And JJ Joe is still the all-time leader in that category, 17 yards per completion. Mother, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. And watch the highlights if you haven't seen him. He could really, he had a beauty of a deep ball. He really did, and really became synonymous with Grant Teaff. That's how I got to kind of connect with JJ. I talked to him probably a handful of times. I interviewed him a few times. Both were about Grant Teaff for stories I was doing. And I mean, first off, just gem of a guy. Such a nice guy, so accommodating. And I've heard from other, people I went to school with and beyond how good he was to young reporters, young people trying to kind of get in the industry. He was great for them, and so much of his time at Baylor as a player is intertwined with obviously the legendary Coach Teaff. And Grant Teaff said after JJ's passing, quote, "I'm honored to have been JJ's coach. I am heartbroken. JJ is one of the finest men I have ever had the privilege of coaching. He was an excellent leader and a talented athlete. He was unselfish and always cared more about the success of his teammates than his own accolades. He was tough, determined, and boy, did he love his teammates and Baylor University." And I think that last part is going to be, the legacy of JJ Joe. For those of us who follow Baylor football really, really closely, I don't know. I had to read it off the page here. We don't know where he is in the record books, but we do know how damn proud he was to be a representative in some way of Baylor. And that's the first thing that came to my mind when I heard of his passing was what an ambassador for Baylor. Through the business world, of which he was very successful, and of course through commentary too. And JJ is a dynamite analyst, by the way. Baylor's been really lucky to have some great analysts in the booth, specifically for football and basketball. And really, you think about the glory days of Baylor football. JJ was a big part of that. Like the great moments that we remember, from the 2010s, the great moments, the great calls, the RG3 touchdown to Terrence Williams against OU, the back-to-back Big 12 championships, 61-58, the McPlay. JJ Joe is in all of that. Like any great call that you remember from an all-time Baylor moment in the last 20 years, JJ's in that. He's a big part of the glory days of Baylor football and truly all of Baylor football. And those of you who had the pleasure of knowing him personally or even having just a couple of conversations with him, I mean, this guy was really proud to be from Arlington and Arlington Lamar, and Baylor as well. And he then had a lifetime of not just success in business, but success, in his church, in his family, and giving back to those communities, both Arlington and Baylor, these communities that he cared about so much. So this was really tough news to come across. Just one of the all-time Baylor guys. Baylor to his core. And you could tell that without even meeting him. You could tell every broadcast, every radio hit, or talk to anybody who played with him or coached him, and you could tell. So those of you who do have JJ Joe stories, I know we saw some come in through the comment section yesterday. Please drop them in the comments. Seriously. Like I would love to hear the JJ Joe stories. There's so many to go around, and you could search far and wide for years, and you'd be hard pressed to find someone to say a negative thing about JJ Joe. So please genuinely get those stories down in the comments. That's not to help out this video. That's to help out everyone who comes across this to know who JJ Joe was, and what a pillar he was for Baylor football and the Baylor community. I could go on all day, but certainly want to reiterate again, our prayers from the Baylor media and certainly everyone who follows this team, and hearts go out to the Joe family and all the lives that he's touched for not long enough, 54 years. Certainly hoping and praying for the best and, hoping that JJ Joe legacy will live on at Baylor and beyond for years to come. No easy segue out of this. We're going to talk some Baylor basketball and preview this game on Saturday. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, a message from Roy, a sponsor for today's show. The future of college sports is here, and it is transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support these athletes they love. Well, now with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support Baylor athletes in the most transparent way possible. The NIL app from Roy allows you to choose the players you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. And the best part of it is, if your player transfers, we know how often that happens, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. It's all about giving fans the control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Baylor athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Bears hit the hardwood again this Saturday, taking on Oklahoma State. It's a night game, 7:00 on Saturday, and normally this is where you say, okay, right, no easy nights in the Big 12, but you're playing Oklahoma State. But maybe not, because they just beat Iowa State, and they beat them a lot, actually. They've won 8 of the last 10 against Iowa State. But they took down the Cyclones. And look, I've got questions about them because Iowa State's been a team I've backed through thick and thin this year as being the second best team in the Big 12 at worst. And I don't think they're quite there. In fact, they're creeping up on the same amount of losses in the Big 12 as Baylor has. But let's be honest with this Oklahoma State team. They're not good. This is not a good basketball team. In fact, they're bad. They're a bad basketball team. That doesn't mean Baylor can't lose to them, but they're not good. They're probably on par with Colorado, so it definitely shows that you can't just automatically step on the floor and beat them. They're not as good as Cincinnati. They're not as good as BYU and some of these other kind of mid-tier teams that you lost to. They're not a very good team. They had a great night on Tuesday at Gallagher-Iba. Truly, they were just firing on all cylinders, and really, it wasn't even like they shot the lights out. I mean, those of you who watched that game, it was a slugfest. Really, it wasn't like, no stats jumped off the page. There was nothing you were saying like, oh, this guy just got hot, or they're hitting the threes and Iowa State's not. It was just that Oklahoma State outworked them for 40 minutes. That's really tough to do against Iowa State. Really tough. A TJ Otzelberger team, it almost never happens. So is Oklahoma State good? No, they're not. But how they beat Iowa State, is what gives me some pause going into this weekend. Because how often do we come on here after a game and talk about how much Baylor got outworked and how they go through the motions for so much of the game? Oklahoma State, they're probably under no illusion that they're just going to make the tournament, but they will play their ass off the whole game. And Baylor has not really shown that in a full 40-minute effort this whole season. So yeah, that does worry me. And they had a good crowd against Iowa State on Tuesday night, but they're a team that's like home, road, doesn't matter. Nobody's going to be believing in us. We've just got to be there for each other kind of thing. And that plays this time of year. And if Baylor can't match that intensity, they might lose, which is not good. Not good at all. But certainly, if you're going to look at a breakout performance in this game against Iowa State, Abu Osmane was 3 of 5 from 3. And he's been a greatly improved shooter for them this year. He had 25 on the night. And Arturo Dean, the kid who transferred in from FIU, not FAU, I believe it was FIU, had 14 points and 7 steals. 7 steals against Iowa State. 7 steals against Taman Lipsey and a team that was supposed to go to the Final Four this year. So that tells you something. All right. They can get after it a little bit. It hasn't led to great numbers in terms of against their competition because, a little factoid here for you, Oklahoma State and Kansas State are the only teams in the bottom 5 in the Big 12 in both offense and defense. So again, not a good team. There is no real reason that Baylor should not be taking care of business against Oklahoma State on Saturday night. But if they don't if they don't wear their effort shoes on Saturday, they might not win. And that would be catastrophic for them, and which we'll talk about in the next segment. But an interesting stat that I find interesting, at least going into this game, is Baylor still somehow in the top 5 in three-point shooting in this conference. Which, to be fair, it's not an elite three-point shooting conference this year, but for Baylor to still be in the top 5 is like, what? Like, after what we've seen the last 2 months? You kidding? But yeah, they are still in the top 5. And that's like, oh, wow, this conference must really not be good. Oklahoma State is bad. They're, I think, 13th in the conference, 14th, 32% from 3. Not very good. And to cap that all off, they didn't go nuts from 3 as a team, but Osmane did, and VJ did in the second half for Baylor. What you have in this matchup on Saturday is the 2 teams that are ranked 15th and 16th, which would translates to second to last and dead last in the Big 12 in defending the 3-point arc. Just not good perimeter defensive teams at all. For those of you keeping score at home, Oklahoma State's 15th and Baylor is 16th. So I said it about, I want to say it was the Arizona game a few weeks ago. It's like, if someone can just kind of, like Osmane did the other night when he went 3 of 5, if someone could just have a night from 3, that could be the difference. Like one guy, that could be the difference. But if we're being honest, guys, Baylor has no excuse. Just no excuse to lose this game. But then again, they had no excuse to lose at Colorado, and they had very few excuses to lose to Cincinnati, if we're being honest. Cincinnati battling for the tournament, home game, I get that. But you saw it in that game. Like Baylor, if they had just had their heads screwed on straight for the whole game, they probably would have won, even with the great effort that Cincinnati was giving. And they did give a great effort, but Baylor was right there in that game, should have won it. So this becomes the most important game of the season right now, Saturday night against Oklahoma State on March 1st, just where we thought we would be on March 1st. We're going to tell you why, specifically why it's the most important game of the season. We're going to do that next on Locked On Baylor. But first, let's hear from a new sponsor on the channel. Fabric by Gerber Life. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching the kids take their first steps, and then before you know it, you're driving them to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online. You can do it right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, they're not even going to require a health exam. All right. And it gives you can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones does not even have to break the bank. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's MEET fabric.com/lockedon, COLLEGE. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states, price subject to underwriting and health questions. And one more time, that's MEET fabric.com/lockedoncollege. So how important is this game with Oklahoma State on Saturday? Mega important, because it could mean your season. Weird. What? Last week, Baylor had a 97% chance to make the tournament. They could just waltz their way into the NCAA tournament. And a week later, you're telling me a game against the second worst team in this conference at home might determine their season? Yes, I am telling you that. I am telling you that, and you better believe it, because Baylor's stock is plummeting. And this has been a talking point over the last few days, specifically after the Colorado game. It's certainly picked up after the Cincinnati loss, too. I've seen it all over social media, Twitter and Facebook, and people, just in my group chats discussing Baylor stuff. People are like, how are we considered a tournament team? Like, what is going on? How are we still in that picture? How are we not on the bubble? Because as I've said a few times, Baylor fans are not stupid, okay? They might not sell out every basketball game, but they're not dumb. And those of us of a certain vintage, aka anyone who's been watching this team for more than 5 years, has seen what a national championship team looks like. They've seen what a team that barely makes the tournament looks like, and they've seen what an NIT team looks like. And this team is very far away from national championship team, and they're a lot closer to NIT team. And they're really teetering on the brink of that right now, because Joe Lunardi was so sure about it last week. Not the case anymore. Baylor was living on that 8-9 line for so much of the season. And I said, a week or two ago, probably not going to change. Probably going to be on that 8-9 line the whole rest of the season. They're not going to get up. They're probably not going to go down. Well, I was wrong. They went down. Lunardi now has them as a 10 seed in his most recent update, which is Wednesday as we're recording this, that he has them as a 10 seed. They have not only fallen from the 8, but they have fallen behind West Virginia, a team they just beat last Saturday, or 2 Saturdays ago, that they were supposed to, kind of be extending an arm's length, keeping them away. No longer the case. West Virginia has leapfrogged them, and they're not the only Big 12 team. BYU now slots in as an 8 seed as well. And one of your best wins on the season, Kansas, well, they've dropped down to a 6 seed. And now Cincinnati's all of a sudden knocking on the door for the tournament. Not good. No way that you slice it is this good for Baylor. I'm sorry. It's just not. And to see that they've fallen behind 2 teams that they felt they were better than, I know they lost to BYU, but felt they were better than, is really disheartening. And the other disheartening part is they got certain highlights here. Lunardi highlights in blue the teams that are locks to make the tournament. In the Big 12, that's Houston, Iowa State, Tech, Arizona, and Kansas. And then NCAA likely is under the green highlighter, which is odds of 90% or above. Might I remind you, at this time last week, Baylor had a 97% shot to get in the tournament. BYU is the only green team in there as the 8 seed. Baylor's 2 spots behind that. West Virginia is ahead of them, number 36 overall, Baylor number 37. So that leads to the question of how much have they dropped in their odds over the last week? They were 97%. Now they're under 90. They might have dropped 10, 15, 20% in that time. That's frightening for Baylor. So to answer the question that a lot of you have had, they're going to be on the bubble. A 10 seed, you're playing with fire. You don't get much lower than a 10 seed as a power 4. You don't go past 11 which is a play-in usually. But the Power 4 teams do not dip past the 11 seed. So if you lose this game against Oklahoma State, you might be out of the picture, which is crazy to think about. Not just because of what they've done the last few years, but of how certain this was only a week ago. Like this is teetering on the dire scale here. And after that, you've got to play TCU on the road. TCU is also not a good team. They're not going to make the tournament, but you've lost to them this year. You lost them at home, and then you got to play Houston at home. And I'm not even counting the Big 12 tournament because you boycott that every year. So this becomes kind of a must-win game for Baylor. Like, seriously, if they don't go out and win this game, there's going to be major issues here. And I don't like being in that situation with a team that just beat a top 10 squad or go on the road against TCU when they have nothing to play for. It's scary, man. Scary set of circumstances here for the Bears. But they just got to take care of business on Saturday. Let me know what you guys think about this Baylor basketball situation. Are they a tournament team? Let me know down in the comments below. Are they going to beat Oklahoma State? Please let me know down in the comments below. Really interested to see what you guys think of this game on Saturday and how it's shaping up. And obviously really excited to see those J.J. Joe stories as well. If you listen to us when you want to listen to us when you're cooking or driving or exercising, find us wherever you find your podcast too. That actually helps out the channel a lot. So does liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Again, about 3/4 of you that are watching every day are not subscribed. That helps us out. Plus, you ring that notification bell, you're going to get notified every time we're coming on here, which is every day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And sometimes we'll do breaking news as well. So I would highly, highly recommend getting in on that so you don't miss any of the Baylor news that we're bringing at least 5 days a week. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. And we'll be back tomorrow with your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.